Hi, my name is Sam Smythe, and I created this Tukam phone stand that you see here. And I'd like to start today by explaining the engineering design process that I used in coming up with it and developing it. And of course, the first thing was just defining the problem, and the problem came about because the pandemic, of course, and as a high school teacher, the idea of moving to online teaching, I knew was going to be a challenge, and especially keeping students engaged and holding them accountable for doing work. In particular, I teach math, and knowing that a huge part of what teaching math is just seeing that my students are putting down work to paper. So rather than seeing their faces, although that's nice to see as well, what I really needed to see was their math, right, their work, and them taking notes and so on. And so I was thinking about ways to do that, and of course I realized, everyone has a smartphone, and I realized, smartphones can connect to online meetings, of course, just the same as a computer can. And so I figured, it was convenient because I realized that the smartphone can also, you can use either camera, the one that's facing towards you, or the one that's facing away from you. And I realized that could be used as a document camera, right? So document cameras, of course, already exist. They've been around for a long time. Many teachers use them to show handwritten work projected behind them. And this was just a way of giving everyone access to a document camera very quickly, very cheaply, using a piece of equipment they already have, their phone, rather than them having to buy a new piece of equipment. So the initial prototype was actually just to take a regular box and basically just cut a hole out of it and put the phone on top like that, and then cut out one of the walls. But then really even one wall wasn't enough because then you didn't have enough light to even see anything, and then it was still just kind of in your way. You couldn't really, you make a bigger hole so you could kind of see it. But it was just kind of taking up a lot of room, and it's just kind of too big, too clunky. And again, it's just kind of hard to see what you're writing, and obviously this just didn't feel like the ideal solution. But it did work as a proof of concept that someone else, I checked, could you join a meeting with a phone here and someone else see your work, and yeah, they can. So that was the initial proof of concept. So I realized that I needed a way to get a significant amount of the stand out of the way. In other words, just to get it so that it's on one side of the paper or the other, so that you have a lot more room and you can actually see what you're writing. So this was the next generation, and you can see it's just made out of cardboard that I kind of cut out and taped together. And I knew I was going to need a lot of counterweight. Basically, that's the only way you could support using a deck of cards here in place of a phone. So it would need a counterweight in order to support the weight of the phone hanging over the side like that and leaving you room to write. So you can see an initial sketch I made and some different angles of it. And I thought, about having a hole cut out for where the camera could look through. And you can see this version needed a lot of counterweight. That was kind of because it was made from multiple pieces of cardboard taped together. Was a big part of the reason that it required all this counterweight in order to support the weight of the phone, or in this case, the deck of cards. And so you can see it was just kind of flimsy, but again, it was just an initial prototype. And I quickly thought about, the fact that there's probably a way to do this out of just a single piece of cardboard. So that was kind of the eureka moment, if you will. And I came up with this design, based somewhat, kind of reminiscent of origami. And you can see how it folded up. So again, this was just cutting out of a single sheet of cardboard, just cutting it out by hand with using a ruler to measure everything out, of course, and scissors and an X-Acto knife. Cut it out, and here it is folded up. And I used some tape here to secure this flap down. And this is essentially what the stand is today, right? It really is just this same thing. And again, so that was really just one day's worth of, over the course of about 2 hours just of prototyping, from going from just like a box to, the really kind of overly counterweighted big version of this stand made from multiple pieces of cardboard to just this single piece of cardboard that only needed, here you can see just the one jar to counterweight it. So the main thing I wanted to address with this design, I liked it for the most part, but I just thought it was be nice to get rid of the tape and to not have to worry about taping anything, especially if I was going to be producing this, and it'd be a lot easier for people to just be able to fold it up and not need tape. And I knew that shoe boxes, had to have a way of coming together that doesn't need any tape. So I thought I'd take a stab at that. And here you can see I've tried to, this was a very early design of trying to get the flaps at the top of the stand to come together by just cutting a slit into them and folding them. But you can see it's a little bit, very crude here, and it's pretty rough. So I started looking at actual shoe boxes and just other boxes and noticing how they come together, how they fold together in a way that doesn't need tape. And so this is one of the first boxes I looked at, and it had this L-cut design here. And so I did use that on one of the prototypes. Actually, the initial run of stands that I made that are behind me use this type of L-cut fold here to come together on the bottom, both here as well as another one here, just as I saw in this shoebox right here. Yeah, and so one of the interesting things about doing this project or any project is it makes you kind of just notice things in much greater detail than you ever did before. And so we've all seen shoe boxes, of course, or different boxes for electronic products. So here's a shoe box as well as a electronic product box. And, sometimes you appreciate, it's packaged nicely, but to really actually take the time to break it down and think about how exactly did that fold together. You just never really are interested, no one I know really is that interested in such a thing. You just kind of toss it. But doing a project like this kind of forces you to take a deeper look. So here you can see in the electronic box there, the way it's kind of clasping together this wall here. And then the way they kind of both fold in on top of each other, as well as this fold that basically any product box these days has, the way that the side walls fold over each other, we started calling a banker's fold, just after banker boxes, but really all boxes use this kind of fold here, where you can see it just presses over itself, really, right? So you've got two walls of the cardboard and then another wall of cardboard pressing over it, and it just presses in and it just gets that tight fit. And you can see here there's kind of two little spots for tabs, but the tabs themselves are very small, right? They don't need to be big at all, because it's just the press of it. It's just all the friction and of the pressure of this wall coming over these two flaps that holds it together. And again, you'll see this kind of fold on basically any shoe box or any electronic product box that you'll buy today. But again, it was just kind of interesting. It's just one of those things. You never really notice how much thought and design went into something like this until you're forced to really study it and look at the details and be like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting, because I actually had a reason to try to understand it. So that was kind of the researching and brainstorming that I would continue to do throughout the process. And at this point, it was just a matter of creating a lot of prototypes. So you can see what my living room floor looked like at this point, just cardboard everywhere and different prototypes and shoe boxes and just trying to making small tweaks to the design. So here you can see this top row are most of, but not even all of, the prototypes that I made by hand, just cutting out with scissors and an X-Acto knife. And here's a video of me going through this top row. And so the main thing I was kind of tweaking with these waves by hand was just the way that this top flap here I wanted it to secure to the wall initially. And because I didn't really have a way of holding this together yet that I liked. So I was kind of actually just cutting slots into the wall here and sticking the tabs directly into the slots here. So you can see there's holes here and here on most of these. And I was playing around with jamming just the cardboard into the wall. Ultimately, that's not the design I went with, because again, it was kind of a finicky process. Here you can especially see them poking through right there. So again, these were all just handmade prototypes. So at this point, I was already using CAD, that's computer assisted design software, to map out the design and just to keeping track of changes and dimensions as I was continued to prototype by hand. So using this online free design software, Onshape, which is similar to any kind of computer-assisted design software, I was, keeping track of my dimensions as I was prototyping, and eventually, I landed on this final kind of prototype here. And at this point, it was just time to figure out, how to manufacture this in a way that didn't require just doing it by hand. And I kind of had this idea in the back of my mind the whole time. That I figured it could probably be laser cut, although I didn't really have a lot of experience with laser cutters. But I just, I knew the concept of laser cutting. And so just kind of a shot in the dark, I reached out to a guy named Teo Gray, based in my hometown in Urbana, Illinois. And he does a lot of fun stuff. And among the things he does is laser cutting. And he likes to provide his laser cutting space for hobbyists and enthusiasts and different projects like this. And I reached out to him, and he was super interested, and we immediately just connected over a Zoom call. And I was just in his workshop, and he just printed one out on his laser cutter, exactly the design that I've been laboriously cutting by hand again and again all these hours. He just very quickly just laser cut it out, and over a Zoom call I explained how to fold it together. And then by the end of that day, I'd bought a whole bunch of cardboard to have shipped to his workshop so that he could laser cut a bunch of them out. And, one of the first things I learned about the whole process was that you really have, something I just hadn't considered yet was just in the manufacturing process, thinking about how are you going to fit these all together, right? How exactly are they going to be printed out? So here you can see we came up with a way to tile 3 of them across by putting one of them in reverse. And so you put 2 of these sheets of cardboard can go in the laser cutter at once, and it cuts out. So it cuts out 6 at a time. You take those out, you put 2 more sheets in, and you go like that. And so you can see each sheet can generate 3 of these. And so that was all part of the consideration of what kind of cardboard to buy and how many we fit on the sheet, and exactly what should the scale of this be. And again, those were all things that I just hadn't really considered up till that point. But again, there's a whole lot of science and design and thought that goes into that side of the manufacturing process of anything, so that you can kind of minimize your waste and your cost. So here you can see a video of the laser cutter in action, cutting out the stands. It's pretty nifty. It goes pretty fast. If you go too fast, if you run the laser at too high power, it does generate a lot of smoke, which can jam up the mirrors that the laser uses. So you don't want to go too fast, or there's a bit of a smoke issue. Yeah, it was really gratifying. It was really interesting to watch this, and you could watch it live over a webcam. So it was just really a gratifying moment for me to see it, this part come to fruition, and seeing it get cut out like this. It was a lot of fun. So here you can see they're done, and so someone's going to open the laser cutter and pick them out just like that. They can just fall right out. And you just pick up the pieces, put 2 more sheets in, and hit start again. So I was pretty happy with this initial design, laser cut design that we printed out. And you can see I've still got many of them behind me here. And then at that point, it was time to kind of create more of a website presence. And so I created this logo and created this website. And it was really amazing. You can create a website like this. Obviously, it's not super professional, but it's pretty decent, I think, for just I was able to get it done in just a couple nights of work. And have this web presence that I could sell them on. So the next major wave of iterations was really inspired by the fact that, as you can see here, the process of actually getting it from the 2-dimensional laser cut form into the fully folded up form ended up being pretty laborious when you multiply it by hundreds, right? Because you have to kind of crease where you're going to fold with something heavy like a ruler and someone stepping on it, and then so there's a lot of folds you have to crease. And then you have to, it's pretty delicate how you kind of had to insert these L-cut tabs that, had gotten from the shoebox, as well as, once you get the hang of it and done it a bunch, it wasn't hard, but, it took some finagling and a little bit of work to actually insert or clasp these two tabs together. And so it was, we had this whole little factory line going, but it was quite a bit of work. And so we wanted a way that would be, easier to assemble. And also, especially if someone was going to do it themselves, this process was just asking a little bit too much of the user to kind of figure out how to do that. So again, this was strictly just kind of there was nothing wrong with the design in terms of its end use, but as a product for a consumer to be able to put together themselves, we just felt like it was a little too much. And so that was kind of the next big challenge. So the two big changes that we made with this final version, actually there's three major changes. The first is, as you can of course see, is the dotted lines that just make it way easier to fold, right? So we really didn't know if the laser cutter was going to be able to do this and if it would make a difference for folding to add these dotted lines compared to the original. So that this way you don't have to do these creases with a ruler that took a long time. It's just kind of a perforated line that you can already fold along. And so it took quite a bit of experimentation. Again, a lot of this, you'd think we were pretty close at this point, but actually getting it into this final form was just iteration after iteration after iteration. Just small little tweaks to my CAD model here, my CAD model there, like a millimeter, and just getting the exact right number of dotted lines so that it was foldable, but not too weak. Again, it was just a lot of iterating. So here you can see the CAD model is just quite a bit more complex. And there's a lot of angles and a lot of just little details here. And so here you can see all of the different laser cut iterations that we tried, and including different, so I've messed around with a lot of different possibilities, including, trying here a skinnier version that would have saved a lot of cardboard if it had worked, but it just wasn't strong enough to go skinnier like that. But yeah, again, you hopefully get some sense of just, it seemed like we were really close at that point once we were here. But again, to get it into a form that really anybody could fold it up, and just that we were totally satisfied with, was quite a bit more iterating and work. And so here you can kind of see the final forms in two-dimensional as well as folded up, as well as a plastic form that my father came up with. He just wanted to try doing it with, instead of cardboard, with old yard sign he had laying around that's, kind of this plasticky yard sign material. So it's a little bit thicker than cardboard. So it requires a slightly different design, but it's a little bit stronger. It's waterproof, of course, which is nice, more durable, and it's using a recyclable material, right? Yard signs that people after the election's over, people don't want the yard signs anymore. And yeah, going back to earlier, you can see again here, I'm kind of going over the different tabs possibilities that I tried, all these different ways of trying to figure out how to get these top fold kind of to stay down and to stay in and stay together. And ultimately we realized, especially with the laser cutting, that it could just stay down pretty cleanly once you put the actual phone on, that it stays pretty nicely there. So, of course, the other big change, in addition to having the laser cut perforations, was the way that the top folds together, using that inspiration from modern day electronics and shoe boxes, where you have this kind of just press fit, so it comes together, and then this folds over the top and just presses in, and the friction with the sides of the walls is enough to keep that in. And then finally, this was curved here because doing this fold meant that the walls here were now at a 90 degree, where originally they were angled in. And that means when you have a phone sitting on it, the original wall that was triangular, the phone camera had a tendency to kind of see that wall in a way you didn't really want. It was kind of in the way. So we went with this kind of curved shape just to cut away a little bit more cardboard. And it's kind of nice because it looks a little more artistic, a little fancier, more like a bird beak. And then the final big update was an idea of Mr. Teo Gray, the guy whose laser cutter we were using, to add in this stand that can go up and hold the phone up in this position so that this way you can turn the phone towards you. You can place this flap down, set the phone on this flap. So this way you can kind of have a selfie mode with your phone where it's facing towards you, as opposed to towards your document camera if you wanted to quickly flip it up and just have a way to just talk to your phone screen. So yeah, it was a simple thing. Really, again, it was a very simple thing, but it taught me a lot about the engineering design process, and how even what seems to be a very simple final product, there can be a lot of thought and iterations that goes into it, and a lot of just subtleties that you just don't appreciate until you really have to do them, including like things like making a website, ordering cardboard, and trying to set up a business. And at this point, it's really about communicating results as I'm doing now. And if I really wanted to keep going with this, I'd have to think about advertising and doing more than just relying on word of mouth. But I hope that gives you a sense of the project, and I hope you have a good one.